situation inside Rikers Island appears to be reaching a boiling point again.
Some officers say they may have custody of the inmates, but they're losing control. Assaults are up and more officers are leaving their jobs.
And now a way to punish inmates who act out could be eliminated. So what now? Here's 7 on Your Side investigative reporter Dan Krauth.
I was like, I'm done.
After 5 years as a correction officer at Rikers Island, Jonathan Suarez says he had enough.
It's just a difficult place to be. It's just hard to go over that bridge and do your job.
Out of all the people in his recruitment class, he knows only a few who are still left on the job.
The inmates completely took control of the facility.
How so?
The housing areas are run by gang members.
Says he was working 16-hour days, no lunch breaks, and often the only officer guarding 45 inmates.
Now it's just you're on your own and there's nobody there to protect you, help you.
More than 3,000 officers left over the past 3 years.
We're in a state of crisis right now. This year alone, we've lost 600 officers due to the same thing, resignations and retirements. We're getting assaulted, and this is our sad reality.
A sad reality also for the inmates.
You're not able to take the inmates to medical attention, to the courts.
The city council voted against adding more than 500 officers this year to replace the ones who left.
There are some folks that are saying it's getting better, and I would tell you that that is patently false.
Councilmember Tiffany Caban represents the area, toured the jail just last week, says adding officers isn't the answer.
We have more correctional staff per incarcerated person than any other facility across the country.
So what's the problem?
Even with the absences. The problem is a few things. From top down, right, is gross mismanagement from the top down.
We do have fewer inmates now, so do we need more corrections officers?
Absolutely, you need more correction officers. We're running unmanned areas right now.
And now the council's looking to remove a form of discipline inside the jail called punitive segregation, otherwise known as solitary confinement.
How could somebody basically commit a crime in jail and have no punishment in jail?
Some critics call it torture. The officers' union calls it an essential jail within a jail for violent inmates who act out. As of now, a majority of the council supports getting rid of it.
The jails is going to get worse. Is this going to be a zoo?
The DOC says they've eliminated punitive segregation altogether this year, but still use what's called enhanced supervision housing for inmates who commit the most violent acts. And even then, they get at least 7 hours a day outside of their cells. In a statement, they said in part, they're committed to not only improving the conditions inside the jails, but supporting staff members as they have one of the hardest jobs there is.
The Rolling Loud concert is rocking Citi Field this weekend, but there's controversy. 3 local drill rappers have been removed from this weekend's festival in Queens at the request of the NYPD. The rappers removed are Shaw E.K. and Ron Suno of the Bronx and 22 G's of Brooklyn. We're joined by 2 guests to talk a little bit about this controversy. Don Florio, known as the lawyer for drill rappers and in many respects, and Stan Noodles, actually the manager, right, for Shaw E.K.
Yes.
Let's clarify, how did Shaw E.K. and the other rappers, drill rappers, find out that they were not allowed to perform in Queens this weekend?
It was literally just a phone call from the booking agent saying, we can't do the set, we're sorry. Rolling Loud apologizes, it wasn't their decision. They're still gonna honor, the payment and everything, but he won't be able to perform in his own backyard.
Mm-hmm. And from what I understand, the NYPD recommended to the organization that at least 3 drill rappers shouldn't perform because of the possibility of violence coming along with them. What's your reaction to that?
It was a little more than 3, but these are the 3 most notable guys who are not even enemies of each other. I know Ron Suno's manager and I know 22G's manager. We talk here and there in passing through the industry and the music business. So it's like, for you to just single out these 3 in their own backyard who are not even enemies of each other made no sense. And we got no explanation. It's just, sorry, it can't happen. And if you don't want more things to happen when you want to perform, just take this on the chin. And it was like, we can't do that.
Well, I mean, we do know the NYPD recommended it because they are fearful that there possibly could be violence with some of the drill rappers. We've seen violence with some of them. Dawn, you represent so many rappers, including Shaw E.K. What's your reaction to them being told, sorry, you can't perform at this big festival which has big names in it?
So I'm not really even surprised because we saw this back in 2019 when Rolling Loud had issued the statement that Pop Smoke, Chef G, Casanova, 22Gs couldn't perform.
But are you concerned that the NYPD or the city may be saying these artists can't perform at venues?
Well, absolutely. It's very disturbing, and it's something I'm really passionate about. And this all comes from the rap unit or the hip hop police, which is actually called the Enterprise Operation Unit. So they basically are a shadowy organization that sort of spies on the rappers, and they report back to NYPD and to the mayor, and they say, okay, we think these people are a problem. But the problem is not with drill music, it's not with these particular rappers, it's just with gun violence in general. And we always hear about, rappers getting into problems, but we don't hear about just the gun violence every day, the regular people that are victims of crime and regular people who commit murders.
Does Shaw E.K. have a criminal record?
No.
Is he in trouble?
No,
Nothing.
And he's not gang affiliated. He doesn't have any pending cases. He's a good kid. I mean, you can speak more.
No cases. He's not in a gang. Baby on the way.
He's 19. He just bought a house. Who does that at 19?
For his whole family, not just him.
What?
Mom, sisters.
And I think a lot of people are still going to say, drill music talks a lot about violence, and that some of the artists do go out there and shoot videos doing bad things.
Yes.
But for somebody that you're saying like Shaw E.K., you say he's not a bad person. What does this mean for his career? Because many rappers have told me, this is a way for people to get out of poverty and bring so many other people and make a lot of money.
In the midst of his career, his first mixtape just released with Warner Records Defiant, Shaw E.K. was #1 on the Billboard Heat Seeking album, which is top 200 all genres, new artists. He was #1. On the big Billboard, he was number 189, first debut mixtape. And then in the midst of that, he can't perform at Rolling Loud, which could lead to him performing at other bigger venues.
What's your message? And we don't have too much time here, but once again, the imagery is violent. Some people watching New York One right now are seeing those videos saying, oh my God, it's violent. Don, what's your message to, let's say, the NYPD and the city when it comes to these artists who you represent a lot of them, and some of them are sometimes charged with very serious crimes?
So we have to have better relationships. So for example, the mayor met with a lot of rappers, including Fabio Foreign and B Love in February. And this all started with my client C Blue, who was accused of shooting a cop. And we all know that that case got dismissed. And that woke the mayor up to drill rap. He didn't even know what drill rap was before. So the message is basically that the mayor needs to meet these rappers one-on-one, know what they're about, and then he can make his decision based upon, who they are. But people kill people. Rap music and drill music do not kill people.
All right. Well, Dawn, the Noodles, thank you. I know this is a bigger conversation, and hopefully we will continue it.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
New York City has officially joined the relief efforts in Puerto Rico days after Hurricane Fiona slammed into the U.S. territory. A team of 3 emergency management specialists was deployed on Tuesday to the ravaged island to help with getting power back to locals and assessing the extent of the damage.
Their job will be to assess damages to infrastructure and essential services caused by heavy rains, floods, and wind, and they will continue to work alongside our local partners and FEMA to make sure support is getting exactly where it is needed.
A second team is set to head to the island on Thursday that will aim to assist smaller communities struggling with basic necessities and downed trees. Fiona has also battered the Dominican Republic with heavy rainfall and powerful winds. Mayor Adams said the aid is about sending a message of solidarity to the large population of Puerto Ricans and Dominicans who make New York City home.
New York stands with our brothers and sisters from Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and all affected countries. And we're here to help.
As of right now, the city has no current plans to send aid dollars. Adams said first the teams on the ground need to determine the needs of the residents before any further help is deployed.
We need to get on the ground like his team did automatically and right away to identify exactly what we're doing, what we're dealing with, where should resources go, and what type of resources should go.
Earlier this week, Governor Hochul had announced that Spanish-speaking state troopers would be mobilized as well, and officials emphasized they will help with long-term recovery efforts. Kelly Mena, New York 1.
The Native Women's Shelter and Center for Research Action on Race Relations are calling for an investigation into the treatment of another Inuk youth at Bat Shaw. Allegations have been raised about a case of severe neglect. Christine Long reports.
It's incredibly damaging to the youth, and something needs to be done.
The Native Women's Shelter says systemic racism is an ongoing problem at the Bat Shaw Youth and Family Center. It's alleged an Inuk youth in care was not given medical treatment until it was too late.
They ignored it to the point where he had to be hospitalized and had his testicle removed. I'm sure there's a record in terms of, the hospital that had to, receive this boy. You would think maybe the hospital would have called and sort of flagged someone about this.
The CIUS-run center has been the subject of investigations in the past, centering around Indigenous youth in its care. This latest allegation was made by an anonymous Bat Shaw staffer who called the Native Women's Shelter for help.
She called to inform us that an Inuit youth was being kept in isolation because of behavioral issues, and he wasn't allowed to speak his own mother tongue. He's kept away from the educators, from the other children. He's watched all the time.
In the past, CRAR has requested investigations into alleged incidents at Bat Shaw, but says the Quebec Human Rights Commission didn't follow through.
It's clear that there are systemic issues involving the treatment of Inuit children and families within our new protection system right here in Montreal. Now, the lack of transparency, the lack of communication, and very likely, as Nakuset mentioned, the lack of accountability within these watchdog or complaint mechanisms raise the question as to whether it's worth it or not.
Both CRAR and the Native Women's Shelter are calling on the Quebec government to order an external independent inquiry into this case, since they say the situation is another example of ongoing systemic problems facing Inuit children and families at Bat Shaw.
About systemic racism, this is what is going on and continues to go on, and there is no safety measures for those that themselves are being mistreated, and it feels like the staff have no outlet, and their only outlet is to call us.
CTV Montreal contacted Bat Shaw for comment, but did not receive a reply by our deadline.
A group called NEPA Stands Up is filing a lawsuit against the Lackawanna County Board of Elections. It comes after a petition to put removing prison solitary confinement on the November ballot was denied. Fox 56's Josh Okalum was at the prison board meeting in Scranton today, learning more about the decision and the lawsuit.
NEPA Stands Up says over 13,000 registered voters signed the petition, and it was submitted in mid-August. 2 weeks ago, it was rejected by the Lackawanna County Board of Elections. The election board claims that they do not have that control over the prisons, and the prison board does.
The decision was not a decision on the merits of their petition or on the merits of the substance of their petition. It was simply based on the law.
NEPA Stands Up says this is false, which is why they are filing the lawsuit.
And we're suing the Board of Elections because they violate the law. They violate the law and the will of 13,000 voters in Lackawanna County.
Prison warden Timothy Betty says they do not have solitary confinement, but restrictive housing, which is for protective, disciplinary, and medical reasons. He also said they get food and their needs attended to, but are only allowed outside of the cell for 1 hour for recreational purposes.
I'm not opposed to it. I want to get people out as much as I can. I want to do it as safely as I can, too.
The prison board said they would explore giving more time for prisoners under protective custody, but Stand Up says this is not enough.
Not the prison board and not the commissioners. This is a choice that needs to be left up to the voters.
NEPA Stands Up had Robin Frager, who was in prison for 17 years and was put in solitary confinement a couple times.
Someone face to face,
After coming out of solitary confinement, your social skills are different. Your emotions are distorted. You're not the same person anymore.
PA Stands Up told us that the ballot is not printed until October, so they're still hoping to get on by then. In Scranton, I'm Josh Shakulam for Fox 56 News.
Hello everyone, I'm Steve Uhara. These are your top stories. The man accused of kidnapping a girl on Hawaii Island is scheduled to enter a plea in court today. 52-year-old Duncan Mahi was indicted for 11 crimes. He faces multiple counts of kidnapping, robbery, sex assault, drug offenses, and other charges. Mahi allegedly abducted a 15-year-old girl at knife point last week and terrorized her until she was rescued the next day in Hilo. He's being held in jail with bail set at $2 million.
Well, last week marked the 14th death at a Rikers Island facility, and tonight, in an exclusive interview, News 12's Caitlin Ulrich speaks with the deceased family's lawyer.
A few days ago, following Kevin Bryan's death, I got in touch with his mother. She asked to call me back, but her lawyer called instead.
Okay, so what do we know so far?
So from speaking to the family, they're completely devastated.
At 35 years old, Bryan died last Wednesday. The Department of Corrections didn't release much about his death other than the cause was under investigation. But a spokesperson at the Correction Officers Benevolent Association confirmed it was suicide. The family lawyer says Bryan was dealing with drug dependency.
So this is someone who worked at Chase Bank, who worked with the church for 15 years. For 15 years, he worked with the church in an outreach program. This is someone who is a good person who tried to give back to the community and help people. So this is not someone who would acclimate well to being incarcerated.
The COPA spokesperson confirmed that Bryan locked himself in a staff bathroom and hung himself. A CO was allegedly attempting to call for backup when it happened because they were all alone. The spokesperson says that the CO was the only officer staffed in the area. They confirmed that Bryan was being monitored by the CO inside an officer station because he was being, quote, bullied by other inmates.
He was being assaulted, attacked, tortured. It doesn't seem like they did much to prevent it.
The family's lawyer says staffing was clearly an issue.
And as a result, it's becoming a death sentence if you get sent to a city jail.
In a statement, COPA President Benny Basio writes that when it comes to supervising housing areas, preventing suicides, and more, all roads lead to, quote, maintaining safe staffing levels, unquote. Basio goes on to say more than 3,500 officers left the department since 2019.
This was a loving mother, loved her son, loved her family, and particularly when it's just unnecessary. This should have never happened.
The family is planning to conduct its own investigation and bring action against the city. I reached out to the Department of Corrections about the claims that only one officer was staffed at the time. A spokesperson said, quote, the city will review the notice of claim, unquote. For News 12, Caitlin Ulrich.
Over solitary confinement and whether it should still exist in U.S. prisons. When we come back, we'll speak to a man who spent a decade in one of those tiny, windowless cells. The United Nations, among other groups, says prolonged or indefinite solitary confinement should be banned. Some experts say it's the same as torture. Yet every day across America, tens of thousands of prisoners sit in cells, often without windows, sometimes the size of parking space. Yale Law School studied this and last month published their findings. As of the summer of 2021, nearly 50,000 U.S. prisoners were held in isolation. They spent an average hours of 22 hours a day in solitary, often for more than 2 weeks at a time. A new bill in California hopes to cut down on that time. It's called the California Mandela Act. It puts rules on how long and how often prisons can put people in isolation. It also outlaws it for younger and older prisoners. Joining me now is Kevin McCarthy, an undergraduate student at UC Berkeley, who is an advocate of the California Mandela Act. And he recently wrote an op-ed for the San Francisco Chronicle about his time in solitary confinement. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Harry. Thank you for having me.
How long were you in prison altogether?
Total of 22 years, from the time I was 16 years old till 39.
And of that time, 22 years, how much did you spend in solitary?
roughly 12 years. 2 years as a minor. That's correct. 2 years as a minor and almost 10 years as an adult.
Why did they tell you they put you in solitary?
I had an interpersonal friendship with somebody who was deemed a prison gang affiliate. California has an administrative regulation. Anybody who's deemed a prison gang affiliate is placed in solitary confinement. We have people who've been in solitary confinement for decades over mere affiliation with other people for political ideas or being a perceived threat to prison officials.
Gotcha. What was it like?
It was, gosh, yeah, you know, it's, I grapple to find the words to explain it. I mean, it was, you know, every day, you know, it was a battle. I remember losing a sense of what human touch felt like. As the years went on, I began to lose, you know, contact with, you know, with my family and loved ones. Little by little, I just, you know, felt like my contact with the world was dwindling. It's torture. It's
Inhumane is a word that's used often. Studies have shown it makes people physically sick, psychologically destabilizing, makes it very difficult for people in solitary to go back in the general prison population. In the time that you were in isolation, do you think for whatever reason they put you there that it worked, that there was some benefit to the other population or to you as a person?
Not at all. I'm still dealing with the adverse effects of solitary confinement to this day. I saw many people attempt suicide just because they couldn't take it any longer. It just makes you know, people worse, and it's a public safety issue. It's a humanitarian issue, and it's also a racial justice issue. You know, I saw that it disproportionately affected people of color. California has the chance to join the more progressive states and pass this law and conform with the UN's you know, suggestion on solitary confinement, which says any longer than 15 days is torture.
No small wonder as we watch you now that you are a student at UC Berkeley. What does it mean to you to be where you are now with that smile on your face?
I'm one of the lucky ones. You know, this doesn't mean that excessive prison sentences work. This doesn't mean that solitary confinement works. You know, thankfully, the admissions department at UC Berkeley, you know, took a chance on me, and you know, it's worked out. But you know, I feel so guilty for those men and women who you know, who aren't so lucky. You know, who you know, still suffer from those torturous effects of solitary confinement and don't have this chance.
Right. Kevin, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us. Good luck to you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.